So on this, the 5th turn of Warriors of God, I've done the movement already. We only had 4 initiatives total for the English. They won it again. What do we have? Well, things kind of opened up with movement into Normandy by the English. And the French then went forward into Scotland. The English reinforced. Ended up reinforcing some more into Scotland, going both into Normandy and Scotland. The French moved forward here, and they moved Philip from Ile-de-France. Now, kind of the problem here, they've got, because of the lower number of initiatives, they've got a couple of guys, they can't move. And that's one of the issues with the game. Even when you get a lot of leaders, if you can't gather them together, you can't do that much. And it felt like Normandy's important. Over here, I got a chance of taking Flanders. That was kind of ignored by the Brits, actually. They probably should have done something about it. Okay, now here we have an interesting situation, which is that the English actually own the territory and have the choice to take this as a siege. What happens if they do? It would be a 2 plus 3 is 5. And there's no significant opposition there. The bravery of the two leading powers would be the same, which I think means he would need a 5 or more to win the area as the French. Now, otherwise, he's facing significantly more forces, 3, 4, 5, 6, to his own 3, 4. Well, maybe not that significant, but it strikes me that he's at a disadvantage in a ground combat, but less of one in a siege. Of course, it's more of a risk in a siege, but he's going to take that. And let's see which way that ends up going. Okay, 2. The siege is not successful. The French have to withdraw. Now, there's no reason to withdraw to Orleans. They've already got that and got a shot at it. Question is it worth withdrawing into more than one area? And I believe so, in order to try to gain control of multiple areas. So I'm going to pull into Burgundy, which is a valuable area, and then up here in Picardy, which is around the Ile-de-France, so it's kind of useful. I'll conduct the field battles and come back in a moment. Mixed results here. There should be a disgraced marker here, but it doesn't have any effect. But the attack on Scotland was foiled. It was actually probably, it would have been better for the English not to reinforce Scotland, just because Clifford only gets 1 die versus William's 3. But with the reinforcement, it was just way overmatched, and he managed to withdraw. Over here, though, the English were defeated, and we saw the loss of William Marshall and Richard of Ilchester. Marshall is a good leader, and it's kind of a shame he's actually dead. So that's going to be some victory points handed over, and also a good chance of getting Normandy here with Philip there. Speaking of which, we're going to be hitting the control phase, and nobody got anything stripped of control. And I'll position things out there for what's going to be gained, but we see the French are set up to try to gain, well, they have some of these, but to try to gain a number of territories. And if they manage to link up most of France, they can start shifting troops they're producing in the south up into where they actually need them at any particular time in the north, presumably. That's a very powerful advantage, which sort of, once the game starts swinging into that position where one side or the other has a strong foothold, where they can chain troops that they produce forward, it becomes much, much more difficult to cope with them if you don't have something equivalent. You end up kind of this disorganized group that can't make use of most of your troops, actually. It doesn't hurt, though, that to do that you have to have lots of territories, you get more production, and the other guy probably doesn't have very many territories. All right, onward. Production-wise, the French built a Burgundian knight because they're looking at, hey, I've got one of the Burgundian dukes, I'll be able to command that. They couldn't build a French knight because they don't have a 3-star leader connected. Philip's out here, he didn't take Normandy, so they couldn't ship troops to him, so those knights wouldn't work. One thing we noticed, a lot of people died. This was a big die-off turn. Last turn was not so much, but here Eleanor back with Tane. You see a number of empty spaces over in England too, just where troops have been built or positioned and there's no one ready to take them. Luckily for the English, their prisoner died, so they won't be paying additional points for that. They weren't going to pay for that again this turn. All right, well, now we place those leaders, assign troops to them, and grab the score. So we reached the end of the turn and allocated out the points. Now, the French have continued to produce a lot of points. Largely, I mean, they have 3 3-point areas under their control. England only has 1. But let's take a look at some of the troops that showed up. The French had the free option to choose what they wanted out of the 2 special ones, so they took Robin Hood, who has too many, or too few troops. You actually could have 3 there. Yeah. And the English in placement took where they could get lots of troops. We also had a placement here where there were a pile of Eleanor's troops that were left over. Well, both of these places with piles of troops attracted the new leaders instead of necessarily going to their homes. That causes the British to be the aggressor in both of them, sort of rebellions against this situation. Robin Hood is apparently the holder of England, whereas Walter of Coutances is trying to come over as some sort of overlord and take control of it. Now, since the English actually still control England, you would say, siege is an option. Siege is not a good option when you're facing someone like Robin Hood, though. Robin Hood has that 4 bravery rating, which means even against someone pretty decent, he's going to have a +2 to the siege die roll. That means it's a 50-50 chance he takes you over. On the other hand, he may be more likely to defeat you in battle with the bowman with his higher rating. But this guy's pretty decent in battle, so I would rather chance that, especially if I can bring reinforcements in. Elsewhere in Anjou, well, this is not too far of a matchup. Certainly Geoffrey Plantagenet has the advantage, but the board is to the disadvantage of the English to a large extent, which is to say there could be other stuff coming in very easily. Over here we have kind of a surprise with Raymond showing up here in Picardy because there were some troops there. That actually is Guillaume's home, but he wanted the troops there and didn't want to come in and invade here. So we got kind of these little pockets. The Scots grabbed a bunch of Dutch reinforcements, mercenaries, to use to bolster their army against a possible another invasion from Ireland. Just, all these little bits going on, but it all moves very fluidly and very, very quickly when you're playing it. Well, here we are on turn 6, the movement phase. And one thing to note with turn 6, the aging, it's automatic that the people who showed up at the beginning of the game will die this turn. So nobody's going to live forever. These turns, I don't know if anybody's still left from that age group. Usually it's pretty unlikely somebody dies in their 6th turn. The English opened things up they had the initiative again by going into Ireland. Pin that Irish force so it can't go into Scotland. The French made a huge blunder. They ended up marching Philip into England. William Longchamps goes down, but now here's the problem. The English can take a siege now. Philip's not going to be able to defeat him, and they have no guns. They have Robin Hood, but he's just a subordinate in the army now, and the siege isn't going to be as likely. On the other hand, 2-1 against Robin Hood, there's a good chance that he would have lost the battle. So, I don't know, but it's almost guaranteed at this point that it's going to be a loss. A little bit of fighting going on here. The English moved over to Flanders here. I think the English are going to take this as a siege, though it's hard because they're facing a couple of gunners there. It may not be a good idea. They may want to fight the ground battle, actually. Anyway, overall in the continent, it looks like France is getting the advantage everywhere except Flanders. But in England, they thought they had it, and now they're in a position where they're not going to get it. They did manage to move leaders up from the south to take a better shot at controlling Anjou still, and then also to grab Normandy, sailing up and over. Two separate initiatives. Roll out the battle, see what happens. So after the battle phase, the French did indeed get driven out of England because of that, but maybe it's not that terrible. They got to withdraw without disgrace, which meant Robin Hood went to Wales. He didn't get that, but Philippe went to Picardy, which he did capture. Add that to the rest of what they've gained, and France now has a very good solid core around their capital. It's going to be hard to take them without a real strong assault. They managed to win the siege in Champagne, which was kind of a chancy thing, about 50-50. Lucci is in prison now. Now it's time for me to start producing the troops and do all that bookkeeping at the end of the turn. Okay, so the game is actually over. Made a lot of deaths, but a new English king showed up, John Lackland. Good old Prince John. The hope of England at this point, but it's too late. It's too late by a leader who was imprisoned, and just the general points that went up to 31. It only takes 30 for victory, so even if that leader hadn't been there. It's just been too successful for the French. I placed the English forces, etc., to attempt to break out. But the truth of the matter is, even if it had been close, like let's say we had been down here, there's too much of a point production each turn for the French at this point to overcome that. And that's something in this game that happens. Sometimes you do see wild swings, but usually what ends up happening is one person gets a real advantage in the strategic picture where they're producing not just troops, which can be recovered from, but victory points at a high rate. I've seen games where it hits around here, then breaks to the break-even point, and then like the luck just turns for some reason, and it shoots down. And in this game, it probably wouldn't have been able to get down far enough to get it to an English victory no matter what. But I have definitely seen games where it went from, the mid to high 20s all the way down to almost being able to pull it off. So there was still some thought there. I'm going to do the other scenario as well, but I'm going to wrap this one up and send it up. This is really a classic situation, this game. I mean, quite often it ends up in this way where one player just is able to get some luck early on and achieve a dominating position, and then it's just impossible to overcome them. Now, it's not like it's unbalanced. I mean, there's so much luck in it that it really isn't. It's just a matter of once you do get that edge, it's hard to unseat the opponent. I've seen it happen, but it's not often. All right, up this one goes.